Thank you for joining the virtual Congress and welcome to our opening plenary. My name is Madina Junussova. I'm General Co-rapporteur of the Congress, and I'm a long-standing ISOCARP member with 25 years of experience in urban and regional planning. And I'm from Kazakhstan, working for the University of Central Asia as the Senior Research Fellow, facilitating the OECD-led global project on sustainable infrastructure in Central Asia. And also I'm contributing capacity building of the civil servants in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, helping them to build urban resilience in their towns. So I would like to inform you that we're going to have several speech, but please, if you have any comments or questions, use the chat area and keep your mics muted until moderators will give you floor to speak. And now I would like to invite my co-reporter, Julio Carrillo, to introduce himself and make a short overview of the program today.
Thank you, Madina. Appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you're coming from. Who's speaking right now is Julio Carrillo, always serving. We are general co-rapporteurs, as Madina mentioned, but most importantly than that is you, the audience. So we want to start actually kicking off this with getting to know you a little bit. And so if you can scan that QR code, that'll be great. While I go through the program and what we're going to talk about today, we're really excited about this virtual pre-Congress is a kickoff or preparation of the in-person Congress, which will happen in October 10 to October 13. And we have curated, we have put a theme and a team together to create some content for you and, you know, evolve in our planning practice. So go ahead and scan that QR code. While I do a personal introduction of myself, I'm a senior planner based in Austin, Texas. I work for an architecture and engineering planning firm, and I've been working as a planner for 17 years. I'm also the director of Planning 2050, which is an initiative, an international initiative for cities and communities that want to be successful on creating cities and communities that are resilient and sustainable. Madina, back to you if you want to go with anything about the specifics on the questions, and I can go through the program real quick.
I see people filling it, so we can share the results a bit later. So let's give them time and proceed.
Perfect. So what we're talking today, we're going to have some opening remarks by Anantha Krishnan, the Secretary General of the Urban Economy Forum, followed by Pietro Elisei, the President of ISOCARP, Elisabeth, which is a board member and also the Congress Director of ISOCARP. Then Madina and myself will be introducing the theme and the tracks and the rapporteurs team for this Congress, followed up by the keynote addresses by Naomi Hoogervorst, Dr. Jorge Wolpert Kuri, and Arthur Orsini. We will then go into a 40-minute of debate, question and answers, where you are going to be participants in this important discussion. We'll have invited speakers or discussants who are Susan Bridge from the Royal Town Planning Institute and Beatriz Hati Itundu, who's a researcher and urban development associate of ICFI. This debate will be moderated by Patricia Canelas, who is the Departmental Lecturer in Sustainable Urban Development of Oxford University in the United Kingdom. After the debate and the Q&A, we'll go through a couple of key messages by Eduardo Lopez Moreno, co-director of the World Urban Pavilion, and we'll close the remarks by the chair of the Urban Economy Forum, Risa Pourvazari, Frank Dehon, who is the Secretary General of ISOCARP, and Elisabeth Belpaire, again, our Congress Director, ISOCARP. We'll wrap with that. So before going into the opening remarks, I think we want to hear from the audience or the results of that quick Mentimeter. Madina?
Sure, I can share my screen if you stop sharing yours.
Sure.
Sorry, can you repeat? Yes, okay, good.
So I think people still really feeling it, but I will show this picture once again close to the I think closing remarks. But now already we see that there are a lot of people from Iran, India, and Kenya. Surprisingly, less people from Europe, but I see that there are some people coming from Vietnam is joining. So let's update you. I will update you a bit later, but let's look at the professional background of participants. So, oh, wow. So majority are from urban planning, but we have also economists, one, actually, one from international development and 3 architects or more urban planners. So I will be updating you, and it's really good to see where you're from and what is your professional background. So I think let's continue. Julio, if you allow me, I will give a floor for the opening remarks to our respected colleagues. So we're giving floor to Anantha Krishnan. He's the Secretary General of Urban Economy Forum. Please, Anantha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madina. Thank you, Julio, for your kind comments. Distinguished guests, speakers, participants, and colleagues. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this virtual pre-Congress event. As we gather here today, you're not just convening for a pre-Congress conference. Actually, what you're doing is we are forging connections, sharing insights, and laying the foundation for innovative solutions to its challenges as sustainable urbanization, finance, and the environment, including climate change, define our times. Last March, Urban Economy Forum and ISOCARP had the honor to launch this year's Joint Congress for Climate Change Urban Finance in an exceptional event at the Canadian Parliament in Ottawa, Canada. This pre-Congress event that starts today also takes place on the heels of the global summits of the G20, the BRICS, the meeting of the G77 countries, and not the least, the first Africa Climate Summit that concluded last week. It's also relevant to note that the just commenced 78th session of the UN General Assembly will be holding key events such as the SDG Sustainable Development Goals Summit and the Climate Action Summit. So it's my hope that the discussions during the next 3 days will also take cognizance of the outcomes of these meetings. We need to be linking up between what happens internationally and what we discuss here. So what is important is that financial resources, they are critical for building resilient, low carbon, and inclusive urban environments that can thrive in the face of global challenges. So based on the principle climate justice overall, we need to emphasize the urgent need for integrated and collaborative approaches involving sustainable urban planning, finance, and community engagement, and alignment with global goals to address the pressing issues of our time, notably climate change, gender justice, poverty, and inequality. I also hope that the sessions will contribute to the exchange between urban finance and planning researchers and practitioners, which is essential for the development of both disciplinary knowledge and professional practice. We need a link between theory and practice. I would like to express our deep gratitude to our sponsors, partners, and speakers for their unwavering support and commitment to the urban planning and development community. Your contributions make events like this possible. Before we dive into the rich content and discussions awaiting us, let us take a moment to acknowledge the dedication and hard work of all the Urban Economy Forum and ISOCARP colleagues and partners who have contributed to the success of this forum and the forum that will be taking place in October. Together, we can harness the power of collective wisdom to shape the future of urban economies. Once again, as the co-host of the Urban Economy Forum ISOCARP joint event, let me welcome you all to the virtual pre-Congress meeting. Let us embark on this exciting journey of discovery, learning, and collaboration, leading to tangible actions. I wish you all an inspiring and productive experience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anantha, for that inspiring opening. I would like to give the floor to our President of International Society of City and Regional Planners, Pietro Elisei. Please, Pietro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madina, dear colleagues. It's a very great pleasure to welcome you all. Good afternoon from Doha, Qatar, where ISOCARP is holding in these days a workshop. And then we will move all together to the real Congress in Toronto. But today we are here to start the virtual one. And this Congress this year, a special one, because it is relying upon a special collaboration between the Urban Economic Forum and ISOCARP. Is the 5th Congress of the Urban Economic Forum and the 59th of the ISOCARP. So we are really a very experienced society. I don't want to say old, but we have a great tradition that we would like to express thanks to your help, even in this Congress in Toronto. I start to say thank you, first of all, the Congress Director for the incredible good job she did, Elisabeth Belpaire. Thank you to the General Rapporteurs, Madina and Julio, and to all board members of ISOCARP, especially the one in the Congress Committee that make this possible, and to the Secretariat of ISOCARP that every day is committed to make this Congress successful. And I'm quite sure that this cooperation between the Urban Economic Forum and the ISOCARP will be very, very successful. And of course, a big thank you to all participants, because without you, we cannot have every year this splendid Congress. Of course, thank you to our friends of the Urban Economic Forum, Reza, Anantha, Vasile, Eduardo, Hilda. I hope I'm not forgetting names. It was really nice to work this year for you. Now, really, we have to make this Congress unique and to get excellent results, because actually we are working on a very difficult topic, but essential for quality of life in our cities, but for the even for the quality of our planet. I mean, for climate action, urban finance. So how do we finance the climate transition? This is an incredible difficult topic for all over the cities, independently on the size, small, medium-sized city, metropolitan area. And then what we have to face, and we have to understand even how to make this possible, climate adaptation, how to make possible climate mitigation, which kind of stakeholders we have to involve in one case or in the other one. So basically, adaptation and mitigation to achieve a sustainable and integrated development in our cities. And to make this, we have to really open many different sectors of planning, from passing through linear economy to circular economy, or maybe to understand how to apply nature-based solution, or how to use in the cities renewable energies through positive energy districts or energy communities. So there are a lot of topics, how the public space, that is the key element of urban planning, is going to change through adaptation and mitigation measures. So we have many challenges to answer in these days. And I hope that at the end of the Congress, we come back to our members and to our colleagues, even not involved in the Congress, with good and operational answers on how to transform in practice the main discussion that we are going to hold in our Congress. So thank you again for being here with us, and I wish you all good luck, to have good time, to enjoy the Congress, and to have really very good discussion. And I hope that at the end of the day, we really can increase the knowledge, because ISOCARP and UEF are working for knowledge to improve the knowledge for planners and for making better cities. Thank you very much. Thank you, and wish you all a good Congress.
Thank you very much, Pietro. Now I'm honored to give a floor to ISOCARP board member, our team of the head of our team, the Congress Director, Elisabeth Belpaire. Bruce, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madina. Equally, a very warm welcome to everyone. As you heard and as you have seen, last week's give us a snapshot of the floodings and the fires, and it put us right in the reality of the climate crisis. But over the past couple of days, we also saw a snapshot of the current state of the SDGs, making very clear that the world is off track. And we got a snapshot of the planetary boundaries update, telling us that our planet is not going well, and that 6 of 9 boundaries are crossed. And yesterday, we got a snapshot of an interim climate report of a metropolitan city, painting also a worrying picture of, for instance, the underground tube infrastructure, which is not fit for purpose already in the near future. And neither are its caring places for our elderly and young, the schools and care homes, for instance, with the rapidly increasing temperatures. So these snapshots, they actually all underscore the urgency that we need to take really more ambitious action. We need to think and act across silos, and we need to overcome the gaps and the barriers. We need to understand that the planet's climate and the ecosystem as a system. And so when we join efforts and we go on this path, we also see that place matters, because solutions, they need to depend on the local context and place is an integrating platform across the sectors. So our joint Congress, the 5th Urban Economy Forum and 59th ISOCARP World Planning Congress, exactly wants to make this happen. And today is the official start. The Congress enables this much needed cross-disciplinary dialogue. Not easy, but we really need to embark on this. Pooling resources, exchanging across, yes, different jargons, enabling new alliances, and jointly grow our tools. So in this way, we can move on the road towards a sustainable, livable, resilient, and more equitable places and communities. And the Congress is unique in this way because we aim to enable this collaborative process and a place-based response to the climate crisis in our cities and regions. ISOCARP, as the International Society of City and Regional Planners, is contributing to knowledge creation using the triple perspective of theory, policy, and practice. And together with Urban Economy Forum, we purposely work together to match for our sessions, finance, planning, decision-making, and decision-taking. So I'm inviting you to explore our rich program, both for the next days. We have 30 sessions lined up for the next 2 days, and in Toronto, with even more sessions. We have organized it around 4 main streams. One is research and case study paper sessions to give you new insights and evidence. Number 2 is high-level roundtables, sharing among peers on the global and regional levels. We have number 3, special sessions that include interactive and creative ones, and 4 multidisciplinary dialogues, both trying to address the gaps we find between finance and action, planning, etc., but also to make us embark on new conversations. For example, what about planning urban carbon credits at the neighborhood level? And what when we look at biodiversity, nature-based solutions, planning and finance? So you will find these topics in the program. We also reflected it in our keynotes. We will have speakers from planning, investment, politics, real estate development, and landscape. We need to push the boundaries and engage necessary but often underrepresented stakeholders. And also here we try to pay attention. In particular, I want to highlight 3: indigenous people, women and young professionals. And we should tap into their 1,000 years of knowledge and thinking across 7 generations, sustainable life patterns, or their roles as change makers, innovators, solution multipliers. So they need to be with everyone at the decision tables. With the Congress, we also aim to continue to push boundaries in thematic areas. For example, the underground and artificial intelligence. Again, you will find several tracks that deal with those topics in the program. And of course, we will continue to ask the critical questions, like the sessions that will follow this opening plenary, how to adapt our education system so we can actually deliver the skills and the competencies we need. And last but not least, the Congress is also a place to connect, to find new friends and meet colleagues again after some time. And for the first time, we offer also in the virtual program 2 urban cafes. They will be moderated by Patricia, and you will find them in the program for tomorrow and the day after. A big thank you to everyone and the very many involved, my colleagues of Urban Economy Forum, the ISOCARP Congress Committee, the Congress team at the track rapporteurs, the steering committee, my fellow colleagues at the Secretariat, and the many partners. Once again, very welcome.
Thank you, Elisabeth. So Julio, please start sharing your screen. And we would like to introduce you to our main tracks. So as we're all human beings and we're all residents, not only planners, we would like to start from the track 1. Track 1 is about community values, and it aims to find synergies and relevant solutions for attracting climate finance and transforming it into locally demanded social, economic, and environmental values for the city residents. And we don't want to leave anyone behind. And I'm happy to introduce the team which is responsible for this track. It's Alusola Alufemi, Akintola Obiemi Comfort, Rajendra Kumar, and Shebneb Koshkara. So now we can introduce the track 2, which is also interesting because if we are human beings and city residents, we also want to decide together. So it's about deciding jointly, and it aims to leverage multidisciplinary, multi-sector, multi-level collaboration and cross-border planning for better urban governance. And of course, something that we hardly can achieve, balancing public and private, global and local urban development needs. And to assist here, we have a great team of Gary Davidson, Hope Magidimisha, Chipungu, Jacob Adhera Babarinde, and Renel Sergeant. Now I'm giving floor to Julio, who will introduce the tracks 3 and 4.
Yeah, thank you, Madina. So track number 3 is a track that aims to investigate ways of proactive planning and effective investment. Here's when we start getting into sessions that combines evidence with foresight, visioning, for transforming cities and communities into economically prosperous, healthy, environmentally friendly, socially just, inclusive, and resilient places. Our track rapporteurs in this track is summarizing the content as well as curating all the moderating, and are Adriano Vicelli, Hadel Abu Zaid, Nadine Bitar, and Sabelo Goniwe Malungu. For track number 4, which is a track with an objective to explore technologies not historically linked to planning practice and urban finance. The amazing group of track rapporteurs for this track are Hannah Obraj Frondis-Zinka, Mohamed Owergi, Tijana Tepek Membisevic, and Siyun Ling. Very special thanks to all of those parts of the Congress team. If we were in a live auditorium, you will be hearing a lot of claps. So thank you so much for all your help and support. And now we need to move to the special keynote addresses. Our speakers today will bring 3 diverse perspectives on climate action and urban finance. We will hear first from Naomi Hoogervorst, who will bring a global perspective, then from Dr. Jorge Wolpert, who will highlight some regional and city-level challenges and solutions. And finally, Arthur Orsini, who will showcase the importance of participatory action at the root level, showcasing his work with communities in various parts of the world. I'll let each of the keynote speakers introduce themselves when the time comes. So with no further ado, I welcome Naomi Hoogervorst from the Planning, Finance, and Economics section of UN Habitat. Naomi, The stage is yours.
Can you
Hello.
start? Okay, I will share your presentation, Naomi. I will assist you.
Great, thank you. Meanwhile, I can introduce myself a bit further. Thank you, Julio. Thank you for all the inspiring introductions. My name is indeed Naomi. I work at UN Habitat headquarters here in Nairobi. And my background is actually architecture and urbanism. And I'm working for UN Habitat since 2017, first in Afghanistan and now part indeed of the section that integrates urban planning, finance and economy. So thank you for sharing the screen. Let's go to the next. And good to see you all, many of you from different places of the world. It's my pleasure, of course, to present at this congress, a virtual congress, to address climate action and urban finance. And it's a great example actually to see how these different organizations come together, exchanging knowledge to sort of tackle connected challenges in this rapidly urbanizing world. So thanks a lot for the opportunity for UN Habitat to speak at this event. And I would like to discuss how the urban planning community, governments and financial actors can collaborate to accelerate local climate action. And also in view of the SDG summit that is taking place today, where yesterday a political declaration was adopted that indeed stated again, we are off track, but also actually focusing on that there's a lot of expectations, a lot of hope and rights actually of people everywhere that we need to address. So I think that's a good setting where we, I first would like to indeed highlight some challenges and then followed by recommendations for actions. Great, let's start. So here we see the Secretary General of the United Nations that stated now many times to put a focus on cities, that cities are on the front lines of the climate crisis, and they're sort of both an objective and a driver to tackle climate change. And if you, no, I think you can stay here for a while. No, maybe we know the numbers, but just to bring them in this discussion. So 70% of cities are experiencing the effects of climate change, while also contributing heavily. So 70% of CO2 emissions are coming from cities, from energy use. They use 75% of all natural resources. They produce also 50% of all waste. So without action, emissions will increase, especially if you take into consideration the urbanization. So around 2.53 billion people are expected to move from rural to urban areas by 2050. And especially that's especially taking place in more emerging economies. So local climate action is a critical step in mitigating these challenges. So next, please. And in the Paris Agreement, to commit to those, countries develop their national urban commitments. And those commitments, they aim at mitigation to make sure that we keep within 1.5 degree global warming goal, but also to make sure that we adapt to the impacts of climate. And what we also see is that a lot of commitments are being made. Also in the national urban policy sphere, 14% of countries, they address climate. However, I think that should be improved. And they need to be more addressed in these NDCs, also the national adaptation plans, and also national urban plans. So if you go to the next slide, you can see from an analysis from 2021 of 157 national determined commitments to see what is actually the urban content in those. And 84% have an urban content with explicit mention of cities. And if you go to the right diagram, you can also see that there's a focus on both urban adaptation and mitigation in 60% of the national determined commitments, but also still 15% have no urban mitigation or adaptation content. So in that context, if we go to the next slide, we see sort of the interconnectedness between national and subnational level, and that they need to collaborate in order to meet those commitments that are made. Next, please. Because in the end, from many researchers and agendas all over the world, we know that climate finance is not reaching the cities. So how can these commitments be turned into implementation and impact? So as you can see, only a small part of the urban adaptation finance and infrastructure investment needs are being covered. There's a lot of barriers on availability and access for cities to access actually finance because of their limited financial capacity or also a lack of creditworthiness. And maybe also good to think about how urban planning can also help identifying those opportunities to address climate change, but how to make them more bankable or financeable. That's something I would like to address also in the next slide, please. Because most of the attendees today are having an urban planning background, and as we are experiencing perhaps, but also reviewing from what's happening globally, that the urban planning systems and the capacities are inadequate to build sustainable and resilient cities, also just stated in the World Cities Report last year. And some of the challenges to highlight that we all can sort of work towards is this challenge of moving from a plan to implementation, and in this case, looking at climate action plans. Also, most countries and cities lack the capacity to work with data to inform their plans and to make sure that they are implemented. There's also a critical lack of urban professional capacity, which I think was very well stated in the report of the Commonwealth, a survey that was done, and where you could actually see that in cities where urbanization is taking place at a high pace, that there's often limited number of planners. And maybe last, also following the city's IPCC report, that planning and design and finance are still identified as 2 of the 6 research areas that need more research to inform action, to make sure that they are more connected and that they can contribute to creating impact. Next, please. So how can well-planned cities contribute to achieve these NDCs, as I just mentioned? So if you look at the emissions from urban sectors, that can be reduced by almost 90% by 2050 if we use sort of the opportunities that we already have today, the technology and the measures that we have in place. And then you can look at the sectors that needed most support is the building sector, transport, materials, and also the waste sector. So, and also imagine the opportunities that 75% of the infrastructure still has to be built. If we do that well, if we do that right, I think we have to do this right, then we can contribute to this transition and to have more resilient, livable and productive cities, to also contribute, actually, see the positive benefits of taking local climate action. Next, please. So I'd like to focus on how can urban planners take action and take the initiative to also work together even better with governments, financial actors, communities, and other urban stakeholders. Next, please. For me, this I still make use of this very insightful, or sort of it creates so much awareness of how we can plan or how we should plan. We are still planning a lot of cities that are based on models that produce urban sprawl instead of compact cities. There's still a lot of inequality, segregation in cities, which can be integrated. And congestion in cities is also increasing. We need connected cities, and those compact, mixed use, connected cities can actually help to also address the climate challenge that we are facing. Next, please. So I think we have to also sort of, in a way, agree we are going to integrate in all the planning that we do from regional to block level, that climate considerations are integrated and promoted and made sure that they are going to be financed and implemented in the end. Next, please. But we need also evidence to do that. So we can advocate better if we have the right data in place, if we track, and if we can improve the data to make sure we can build the case. And there are several tools for that. So here you can also see a part of the urban monitoring framework, which has been adopted by the statistical commissions to make sure that we have a framework to also measure progress on the SDGs in cities. And then you can see in this graph what is already sort of in present and what are still challenges to work on. There's also other tools that I will highlight some today, our city plans, capital investment planning, observatory of proximities, and the SDG project assessment tool, some initiatives that UN Habitat is working on to create this evidence to inform financial plans. Next, please. And maybe lastly, as part of this planning process, to make sure that, and I think as we are all here discussing these issues, we should be on the same page, but to make sure that the process of planning is integrated and participatory, to make sure that from left to right, from assessment to implementation, that we map the vulnerabilities, that we plan green and blue, but that we also make sure that we prioritize investments, and that should be a key focus of our work to actually create implementation. That we, and these are all countries and cities that are working with these tools and processes. Next, please. I hope I'm still on track. But how to bridge that investment gap? So complemented by the quality and the viability of those project pipelines following this planning process. Also, the financial capacity of cities will help to attract and manage sort of different sources of finance. And those also must be considered by the funds and the financiers to make sure that they're also operating at this the subnational level. I think also key to make sure that we bridge the gap is to make sure that we realize that the technical knowledge and skills are with planners, to make sure that the plans, the urban plans that are being developed, that they are all climate resilient and that they produce low carbon urban development projects. And also to make sure that they are identifying opportunities to make sure that those funds and financiers can actually invest in those projects. And beyond project level, urban planners can also work together with city and national governments to advocate for policies and regulations and to encourage the right decisions. So they are influencing the targets of countries related to climate. They can influence adaptation plans, they can influence design standards, and also make sure that there are incentives in place to encourage not only private investment, but also household investment, how you can take along the communities in cities to be part of this process. And talking about households, thanks for this slide change. The need to promote localized climate finance is not only to be effective, but also to make sure there's a process of justice. Because Most vulnerable and marginalized communities are being impacted by climate change. And if you look at how we can have a just and green transition, we also have to make sure that these resources are channeled to local governments and communities, so they are enabled to adapt to climate change and reduce emissions and build a resilience. And that also means that we have to empower people living close to the challenges at hand, so we also understand the investments are aligned with their needs and context. And lastly, to make sure that there's an accountability in place to ensure that the benefits of climate action are also equitably distributed, leaving no one behind. So as UN Habitat, we are also involved in a number of, we call them vertical climate funds, maybe all familiar to you, to make sure that the finance that is meant to be invested in climate action is entering in the place where it's needed most. But that process of submitting projects to access those climate finance opportunities, it requires quite a capacity and a long-term commitment. And we also realize it's not an easy process, and there's still a lot of barriers to face. But just to give some examples where we were able to make sure that the Green Climate Fund or Adaptation Fund or green bonds are sort of being attracted to invest in places needed, is a project in Cuba now to help with an energy efficient housing system. And the Adaptation Fund, it has actually a huge urban planning component to improve the climate resilience of coastal settlements and communities in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. And the Jeff-funded project also implemented together with the UN Environment Programme to help cities access innovative and private financing for climate adaptation. So we're, as UN Habitat, also testing and to see and to learn also from this conference today how we can inform good practice and make sure that this acceleration can be done. Next, please. So just to summarize some priorities for action, actually maybe following the recommendations or areas for action in the presentation, planners can together work on climate action to develop this evidence-based, integrated, inclusive climate action plans and or include climate in all the plans being developed. Engage with financial institutions in the planning stage to make sure that those mechanisms for finance are being leveraged and explore innovative financing mechanisms. Build the capacities of national governments and also cities and communities to make sure that they can engage with those finance mechanisms and to keep on advocating for policy and regulation change and engage in this kind of multi-stakeholder dialogues. And I'm not sure, I think I'm past over time, but we can go more in detail in the discussion, I hope. But how to engage in this global debate, as I mentioned, one of the key actions that one can do. You can share your innovative solutions on the Climate for Cities Climate Action for Cities campaign. I put in the link, I can share my presentation later. So happy to learn from yours. We have Urban October coming up, which also focuses on growth, economy, but mainly also on financing sustainable urban futures. Happy to join and to promote that all together. And of course, the climate conference is coming up, where there will be an urban pavilion, and there's an opportunity to apply for events and demonstrate good solutions, and also to join an initiative on more urban resilience for the next generation.
Thank you, Naomi.
Yes, that was the last slide. Here's some tools, but thanks a lot for your attention, and looking forward to the discussion. Thanks all.
Awesome. Now, our next keynote speaker is Jorge Wolpert. Jorge, I'll let you introduce yourself and your speaker.
Hi.
Yeah, there you go. And hopefully you're able to share your screen.
Let me see.
I can help with sharing the walls.
Okay.
You can do that too, yes.
Yeah, I sent my presentation yesterday to Julio. Oh, yeah. Hello, everybody. I am Jorge Wolpert from Mexico. And I was very interested in hearing everything Naomi had to say. As we are knowledgeable today, climate emergency is actually going on in the world. Just leave the first one. I wanted first to introduce a little bit about what I am going to be talking about, because as we can see in the events of just these past 2 weeks, climate change has become an issue all over the world in every latitude. And if we want to be able to understand the size of the problem, we have to understand that the war on climate, as Michael Mann usually calls it, will be won because we will win it, but the battlefield are actually the cities. And I understand very well that it's sometimes very difficult for local authorities at both national but particularly subnational levels to be able to understand the importance of their decisions. And most of the urban discussions are taking place in environments where urbanists and architects discuss of it, probably experts in certain areas. But the information and the knowledge that we develop does not necessarily reach the decision makers. So one thing that we need to be very conscious about is the importance of letting the urbanists and the experts tell the local authorities, communicate to the decision makers what is actually going on at the moment. All these pictures are taken from very recent events. We have mobilization in different parts of the world by youth. Only yesterday there were big demonstrations in New York City, and I think that there is no other way but to couple the urban agendas with the climate agenda. I think that is clear for us, that we know a little bit about what is going on with climate change. But the ability to communicate that information to decision makers needs to be improved a lot. On the other hand, we have the finance problem. So first, we need to make sure that the local authorities learn about the importance and the big problem that cities face in this climate scenario. But then we understand, and Naomi explained it very well, that 90% of the finance does not actually reach the cities. And we all know and are aware that the solutions are there, climate resilient solutions, renewable energy transitions, but somehow it is proven very difficult and very hard to make that finance reach national, particularly subnational solutions. So we have very good urban plans in some cases, but the finance to make them to reach the implementation phase are not there. That is wrong. The finance is there. And not only regular equity solutions and the financial usual routes, but green climate funds are available to reach solutions at the city level or the subnational level. The big problem and the reason why this 90% of total finance not reaching the cities is because we sometimes are failing to elaborate sound proposals for finance. And not in Mexico and Latin American region, there is also a lack of knowledge in the technical side in order people at the local level in cities, at least in Mexico, this is a very real case, do not know that there is global finance available. And being always dealing with day-to-day issues, they don't have teams working for the future. And that is probably a job that urban planners and architects and climate specialists need to be doing and trying to reach local authorities with saying, knocking on their door and saying, there is finance for these things that could be done. And also this, the lack of ability to reach financial stage for implementation in green urban solutions, it also has to do with how the urban plans are being tailored. At the moment, we find many urban plans for the long term, 20 years, which is very good. Cities last hundreds of years, and we need very sound and comprehensive urban plans. But we need to be able to scale them down and present them in a fashion that we can see short-term solutions and plan accordingly, finance opportunities to implement those plans in the short term. So this is a big issue because we are used to find long-term plans, and sometimes it is they are explained in a language that makes it more difficult to actually break them into parts that can actually become each of them a very detailed short-term proposition in order to access finance. Now, I'm talking about funds, green funds, and resources that are available for solutions, but sometimes these multilateral agencies or funding institutions, they lack proposals. So we as experts in urban planning and sustainable solutions need to be helping local authorities develop these proposals to access funds. There are other solutions that can be prioritized in a fashion that probably less expensive measures that are very climate resilient and efficient in terms of how to deal with the climate emergency, and that are not too expensive. For example, reforesting cities. The impact of reforesting cities is huge. And I believe firmly that we could be planning for each city in the world a reforestation plan that would probably need much less investment than other infrastructure large projects. I'm not saying that we shouldn't task or go for finance for large projects or expensive projects, but there are solutions that are less expensive and that probably local authorities would be interested in trying to implement, because they have many advantages, starting with the fact that investment, the cost benefit of reforesting is you can see it in the very short term, and the benefits are huge. So I have dealt with many local authorities in my professional career, and one constant that I have always observed is that they are looking at the short term, because they have short periods to govern a city. They have very large issues that they need to handle day to day. And the experts tend to go to them and say, no, you're doing everything wrong. I mean, you have to look in the long term. You have to focus on this or that. You have to gather all the people in the academia and the private sector and elaborate much more important urban plans for the future, when their problems are right now and right there, when actually they have sometimes obviously political agendas to attend. And I noticed that we speak different languages, as if we were speaking literally different languages. So what happens with local authorities? Usually they are not experts. That's in the majority of the cases. And it gets difficult for them to understand the big problem, for example, that climate change is for this, and the huge impact on people and the political revenue that they would gain from implementing short-term climate solutions. And also they usually do not know, are not aware that there is climate available, and they just need to present much thorough and elaborated financial proposals for this access to finance. We tend to say as experts that they need to gain more taxes from land in their own city, and be more independent from the national governments. Of course, that is a very sound route to gain access to funds for implementation in urban projects. But there are always also funds at the national level, I'm talking at least in the region, in Latin America, that exist, and that local authorities are not able to access them because they do not know how to do it. So a big part of the experts and the urban planners' new agenda should be to, in the very short term, teach local authorities what they could do, what they could gain, and how they could actually finance it. Looking first at national opportunities for finance, working together with private sector in certain projects. Private sector is always interested in helping and working with the government certain solutions, because it is business for them. So
absolutely. Well, Jorge, that was great, because yeah, that's basically what this Congress is about, is climate action, is how, you know, urban planners are going to take that step towards building capacity for you know, authorities and helping them in building this you know, this challenge. So thank you so much, Jorge. Was great presentation. I really appreciate it. I think we need to move on to Arthur's now, who's gonna I'll let Arthur introduce yourself, and you're gonna present some of your work across many different communities in the world.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hello. I am going to press play. Okay, can you see the full slide? Yes? Okay, I'm going to talk specifically about one element of what, well, Jorge said, build your case. He also said the cities are the battlefield. So this is about preparing 10-year-old combatants as change agents. And also Naomi mentioned about participatory action. And I think we're going to really narrow down in here for the next 10 minutes about a very specific audience. I'm talking about 10-year-old change agents on a topic of how can student leaders reduce car trips to school. So this is the topic here. I have worked with students. I've worked directly with the target audience. When I believe that if you're doing behavior change, you work with your target audience. I've worked with young children and teenagers since the 90s, and I'm convinced that this is the way to create enduring change. So for a focus on one issue, one small issue of too many children and teenagers are driven to school every day. This is the topic for climate action that I'd like to address. Because it's a school issue, I'm going to use the term youth engagement and student leadership in the same capacity, but I believe that they have the same benefits for climate action. So in this issue, who is going to tackle this? It's not going to be the parents, teachers, and principals who we have been relying upon. And there's something that planners and engineers, we need a hybrid in between them and how they tackle this urban issue, because really it's a social issue. It's about behavior. When people talk about schools and the traffic go around schools, that there's so many cars coming to schools, before tackling this from an engineering perspective, I'd say to people, look at the school 2 hours after school begins. Look at the streets around the schools. If there's no traffic jams around the schools in the middle of the school day, then you're talking about a behavior issue. It's less of engineering. If it's a busy street, then there's more engineering required. To work, and what we're going to talk about here is much less expensive than putting in engineering in infrastructure. So here's what one principal said, and it's echoed by many. There's a feeling amongst educators that we have issues that have been downloaded onto the school system in ways that they can't actually address them. And this principal believes that it may be hard to find someone who could build up from the groundswell. So this principal also says, I do believe that this is the way to reduce vehicle trips to school, to develop global citizens who are empowered to know that they can make a difference. Change agents. So, as this principal said, how do we develop global citizens who are empowered to make a difference? My theory, the work I've done has said we need youth engagement facilitators. I doubt that there's anyone on this call who is going to be the one going into the schools, but what we're looking for is we want climate action and health and wellness coaches who will go in to make this happen. So how do we do this? Well, the easiest thing is to just work directly with young students who know how to reduce car trips to school. But you're probably not going to find any who are already skilled in this manner. So the next step is to find students who have a curiosity about reducing car trips to school or about reducing climate change, climate action in any capacity. Once you find people, whoever they are, don't lose them. How do you maintain people who show an interest and come in to do this as a volunteer aspect in their lives? You learn what motivates them and learn what skills that they want in order to pursue this issue. Once people show up, the most important thing is to build a cohesive group. A cohesive group will thrive, will continue, and will succeed. Support them. They need to understand the school community. So as a coach, you're going to help support them in finding out what the school's patterns are. Don't do anything that would embarrass them. Don't ask them to do anything that would embarrass them, because this is a social issue and their social credibility is on the line when they reach out beyond their immediate social network. Plan as many activities and events as there are students in your group. Everyone takes a lead in something. And be the coach. So I'm looking at the work actually done by young people as young as 9 years old. The coach doesn't go out on the field, and so the coach helps the students, and they have center stage at their school. And then the best thing is to expand them by connecting them with other leaders at other schools. And this is why it's not up to parents and teachers and principals. It's because it can't be isolated per school. Each community needs to have a network of these change agents. So in essence, what we're looking at, what I'm talking about here is small teams of student leaders who are coached and supported to become change agents. And they're done by a youth engagement facilitator who's also coaching at other schools in the same community. Young people, I'm sure if you have children, you will know that young people are keenly observant. And as young as 9, they have such insight into the neighborhood that they live. 9-year-olds have insight into classroom dynamics, family dynamics, social elements. They understand a lot about what's going on. And this is your expert target audience. In the work that I do to promote youth engagement work, there's the model, the research, the theory behind this. This is the agenda for a workshop and training it. 2 things that I would like to point out here is, first of all, youth engagement doesn't start with 0. As I said, 9-year-olds come into the room with a lot of expertise. So if you look at this little graph there, the purple, the recruitment, it doesn't start at the bottom. You're already starting with something. And when a new group forms, it's exciting, there's motivation, but that doesn't always last. And so as the motivation of an early group sort of begins to decline, it's the yellow, the skill building that brings things back up. And when you're working with a young group who are passionate, the ability to help them develop their skills benefits the group and benefits them. And as we'll see, benefits the ongoing work that they do in a variety of issues. So if you have a group of young people who come together on climate action, it is essential to ask them 2 questions. First of all is, why are they there? Why do they want to participate? What motivates them? And secondly, because this is not just about our own behavior, because it's about other people around, you need to ask them, how do you want it to look? We live in a social environment, and this is important for them to recognize how it's going to look amongst their peers. It needs to be fun. And I say that in a way that makes me a little bit nervous when I talk with adults about fun, because adults are expected to not be entertained. We go to meetings that can be, return to meetings that do not engage so much. And we're talking about young people to voluntarily come and return. And in order for them to succeed, there has to be a cohesive group that continues. And I believe that this is the most valuable element of it, is enjoying the process. It is going to last and it's going to endure. Now, Dr. Nikki Harry from the University of Auckland writes that positive emotions are conducive to creativity. I think this is intuitive. We understand this. And when we look for and seize opportunities, it's best if we are finding it in a positive way. So the slogan I have is, fun learning is not trivial. It is worth it. Fun leads to comfort, which leads to creativity, which leads to confidence, and that's how goals are achieved. It also means retention and longevity, and to have students who are at a young age become engaged and want to continue it benefits us all. These are the change agents we're looking for. So confidence was the biggest result, the biggest goal that students took back. This is from Toronto. These were high school students. I don't only work with young children. These high school students on the stage with me designed a conference. The auditorium was filled with Toronto high school students from elsewhere. And at the very end, after a day of looking at different results and different transportation initiatives that were there, what was the most valuable thing that you bring back to your school? And it wasn't any of the actual tools, it was the confidence to know that this is what a group of young people can do. And when confidence inspires other people, then you're working with a group of 8 students is larger than that. And this is where the idea of how do we get change agents going is through strengthening young populations on the ground. When that happens, the social dynamics can change. The identity of your climate action, whether it's increasing cycling to school or any other recycling energy elements, there's a social identity to it. So we do not make up our identities, we join them. And as a group, we can steer them in a direction that is more inviting for others. I've got a couple of examples just to show you, does it work? How does it work in the short and the long term? This is the result at one school where, for a variety of reasons, after talking to the principal, I met for 2 hours with 7 of the senior students. Now, this school only goes to grade 5, so these students were grade 4 and 5 students. They surveyed on Tuesday, they surveyed on Wednesday. Wednesday was a big event day, and they completely reversed the number of cars versus people walking coming to school. What I really appreciated from what one young woman said was, this was a way for them to be leaders without being bossy, where you can show your skills and show your personality. And to me, this underlines the fact that young people want to take action. They want to do what they believe needs to be done, but they do not want to be seen as being bossy. And when you are part of a program that's sanctioned by your community, by your school, by this community, then it isn't being bossy. You're being part of a movement rather than being judgmental on your peers. One other example, it's a short presentation, so one other example, and this it looks at the commuting habits over almost the course of a year. I just want to focus in on the walking element of it. You can see that there were 5 times that these assessments were done, and I want to describe that we want to be inclusive. Not everyone can walk to school. So for anyone who can't walk the whole way to school, there's an initiative called Park and Walk. It just means that the car doesn't come to the school. If the car stays 2 blocks away from the school, it reduces traffic and it allows a little bit of walking. So people can come further, or they're from 2 houses, the mother and the father don't live together, and sometimes it's further. But either way, in this initiative, the middle line, which is the light green line, was the event day. And yes, lots of people walked and lots of people did park and walk. And you can see that the car was extremely low on that day. Now, I don't hold a lot of credibility on the event days. They're good to drum up enthusiasm, but they don't last. The darker green one, which was a week later, the last week of school, it was not much lower in terms of the number of people walking. So even without any campaigning, it's still maintained. But the pale blue line is 3 months later. So school ends in Canada at the end of June. There's no school in July and August. In September, I said to the principal, let's take a look. Let's just see where it's at. And so the student leaders who remained, who hadn't graduated out, did another survey in September, and the numbers were not that far off and nowhere near as low as they had been at the very beginning of the project. So essentially, in terms of managing complex change, which is what we're talking about when it comes to driving to school, because it's happening a lot, here's a system for it. Now, in this work on this topic, the vision, the goal was set. It was reducing car trips to school. It could be also called more walking, more cycling, but let's just call it reducing car trips to school. And because this approach is about youth engagement, the motivation is intrinsic for the students who are involved. So if it's authentic youth engagement as opposed to tokenized, if it's authentic, then you're building skills. So you've got 3 right there. There are a lot of activities going on. They're small pieces, but they have a lot of resources. And to have a skilled group of young people in the community to adapt them gives you a very strong action plan. So all we're missing right now is the resources. And what I have found continually is that there are pilot projects, and then there are more pilot projects, and they are not continued to be sustained. What is needed is that instead of more engineering elements, but what this will demonstrate is that there needs to be some kind of continuity that takes young people and skills them in whatever element of climate action they are personally passionate in and can keep moving forward. And this is, I think, where I'm going to stop. Yes, 10-year-old change agents can reduce car trips to school, and they can do this in your community if you sustain that.
Perfect. Thank you, Arthur, for highlighting that importance of the resources, right, into communities to be able to actually sustain climate action. That was very, very beautiful. Thank you. Appreciate it so much. Madina, I think you can actually share a little bit
I was getting messages from people curious about who is participating. So there is some information about the countries. So we still have Iran in the middle. We have China, India, Kenya, Uganda, and surprisingly less people from European countries. But we hope more will join. And if you look at the professions, so not surprisingly, we have most of the urban planners, and unfortunately, we don't have anything from finance and public administration. So hopefully we'll have some civil servants and people from the banks soon. But we have us professions, so we should figure out who are those. So please use the chat area and add your professional background if you didn't find it among these proposed options. Yeah, Julio, please go ahead because we're a bit over the time.
Yeah, thank you, Madina. We're trying to get back on track. I think we're a little behind, a few minutes late, but I want to introduce you to this portion that is going to be moderated by Patricia Canelas. She's the co-chair, committee, and co-director and lecturer of Master of Sustainable Urban Development at Oxford University. And we'll have participations from Susan Bridge, from the president of the Royal Town Planning Institute, and also Beatriz Hati Gitundu, researcher and urban development associate at ICFI. Thank you again. I hope you can move on to the debate now.
Thank you, Julio. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to ISOCARP and UEF for inviting me, for being here today. It's a great pleasure to be here, on the one hand, listening to this fascinating presentation that are opening up and triggering our imagination into new futures. I hear quite a lot of interesting possible threads for discussion. I'll just highlight a couple very briefly. I see this idea of accelerate action, which I think we can all agree on, how important that is. I hear this idea of multi-stakeholder engagement, fascinating different angles from the three different speakers, the financiers, the householders, local authorities, youth, just to say a few of the ones we've heard, to use Arthur's expression, the change agents that we so, desperately need. It is a bit desperate. So it's now my pleasure to ask our two discussants to give their thoughts on the three presentations we've heard just now before we open the floor to the audience. So do please ask questions. I see a few questions on the chat box already. Please do feel free to share your insights, your anxieties with us all here so we can have a more and more informed discussion. So Susan, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Patricia. That's lovely. I'm going to share my screen if I can. I did want to put the slideshow up. I don't think it's going to do that. What I would like to talk about is the concept of climate justice. That frames the FRTPI's response to the climate emergency. As the climate crisis deepens, disadvantaged communities will bear the brunt of its effects, and we know that. It's not just a scientific or technical issue, it's very much an ethical challenge. We know that climate justice focuses on social factors that makes communities more vulnerable to change, and how adaptation and mitigation policies impact on different groups. So climate justice focuses on 4 areas of inequality: its causes, its consequences, the responses, and procedural or governance injustices. Policymakers must consider not only how and why levels of vulnerability to climate change vary, but also how and why their policy responses impact on the different groups. This requires long-term thinking, coordination and engagement across all sectors and places, all of which demands effective spatial planning. So we need to consider and address diversity and inclusivity with real engagement and across all communities. We also have to take into account broader social costs and benefits of climate adaptation and mitigation. It must address governance, resources, and institutional capacity. And if we do this, we can tell compelling stories that drive action and change. The core purpose of planning is the creation of healthy, sustainable, and resilient places that are fair to everyone. Many of the adverse impacts of climate change, such as extreme heat and flooding, vary spatially, and hence solutions need to be developed locally. And we have certainly seen that this summer, haven't we? Some of these solutions include consenting renewable energy developments and preventing fossil fuel extraction, enhancing communities' resilience, encouraging a wide range of behavioural change, such as through the creation of green and walkable streets. So, as planning operates within a local democratic context, it provides a platform for communities to participate. It also offers the opportunity to set and implement the long-term strategic vision necessary to deal with climate impact, such as sea level rises. So climate change does not respect boundaries, so there needs to be collaboration within and between authorities at all levels of governance. The strategic or urban level of planning is uniquely suited to address climate vulnerability. Strategic planning can be used to set out broad principles and defined objectives to mitigate climate change impacts, which local authorities must meet, but they must also have flexibility in the measures that they deploy. And planners will play a critical role in leading on climate justice across political boundaries and changes in political leadership. Knowledge exchange, collaboration and policy development among planners is key to achieving long-term change. Evidence bases for strategic planning should therefore consider social factors of vulnerability to climate hazards in order to develop the right policy interventions for their areas. So what are the key actions? We do need strong evidence bases which address local and regional issues, and we must facilitate collaboration between authorities. Green and blue infrastructure should be used to mitigate specific effects, and joint working between authorities is absolutely essential to provide better funding and resources to develop evidence bases, strategic plans, and skills. And finally, we must develop mapping tools that combine socio-spatial data and climate hazards, such as the Climate Just tool, a small extract of which you can see here on the slide, which was done with the support of the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. And you'll see that on this particular example, the red does highlight those areas on the east coast of England which are extremely vulnerable to sea level rising. Thank you very much, and I'll hand it back to Patricia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan, for in such articulate way bringing together, unpacking this theoretical concept of climate justice and giving us some very practical ways forward with this final key action points. Thank you for that. So now next we're going to hear from Beatrice Atti-Guitoum. Beatrice, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Patricia, and thank you for having me here. I take it as a great opportunity to have a young professional in the urban space in the front line discussing urban climate change and climate financing and urban development. For a little change of gear here, I will not share my screen because I want this to be more interactive, and I will quite reflect on what all the other speakers have talked about. And so far, I think from the discussions and from the main kickoff put together by the presenters, I think my observation has been there is two demands. There is need to move with speed. There is need to have a climate action that is much more quicker than we have done in the past decades. But more importantly to me is not just moving with speed, but moving together. The dynamics of what that means, especially in a world that is very heterogeneous, is something that we need to discuss in deeper length. And as I move into my reflection, which I think should be within 2 minutes, I will put together 4 pockets of effectiveness and allow me to put out jargons here, which I hope will be useful to all of you. 4 pockets of effectiveness that have been highlighted by the previous speakers. And then I will also highlight 3 key things that I will advise us to help, that we need to take caution of, not to fall through the cracks, because through the discussions, there are few dynamics that I feel should be on the spotlight as well. So first, I feel in the climate resilience agenda, we must blend a quadripartite perspective. What do I mean by this? We need 4 key perspectives that need to be focused on, and I'm happy that Naomi, Jorge, and Arthur have mentioned this in their presentations. And this is commitment, capacity. A new one that has come up is compassion across generations and community. So starting with the first one on commitment, I think throughout the presentations and throughout the session, we cannot discount the fact that there is a large global commitment to addressing the climate crisis. And even in the last sessions that we have had in the African Climate Summit, we saw a commitment of about $26 billion towards climate action. But that now is not the problem. Many countries, many local government agencies are committing towards climate action. But the problem is the governance and accountability mechanisms for this accountability that we have. So I think it's a thumbs up to all urban change makers. And thank you, Arthur, for changing our language from urban planners to urban change makers, that we need to commit, but we also need to interrogate the governance mechanisms that are used to govern the commitments that we have to climate adaptation. Second is capacity. I will not repeat what the other speakers have said. They have said we lack capacity in planning. We lack capacity in financial resources. We do not have enough data and evidence to drive the climate action. But I'll add the fourth one here. We lack, or cities lack capacities to disrupt. What do I mean by this? It's not enough what we are doing within our cities. For transformational change, we need cities to have the capacity to disrupt systems that have been used to govern how urbanism is practiced. And especially, I'll talk about the Global South. Giving an example of Nairobi, our urban development, to a large extent, has been shaped by a master plan that was done in 1948 during the colonial times. And even though we have created new urban plans throughout the decades, you still see the outlook of the city and the typology of the city still manifesting the colonial heritage. So cities are trying to rebuild a better urban system for themselves, but there's still not enough capacity for them to disrupt systems that do not work. I think again, to give a moving forward trajectory, we have seen Nairobi also moving out of the conventional ways of doing planning, which does not work for the city. And we have seen approaches like the special planning area approach, which I think maybe colleagues from Nairobi and Naomi and the others from Nairobi may know about. But this for me is a transformational strategy to try and go beyond the boundaries that have been set that do not work for urban planning. This means that urban planning needs to look at the current demands of the city and plan standards and policies according to what the city's needs, but not according to what had been set before during the colonial heritage. So cities need a capacity to disrupt. Thirdly, compassion. The greatest question that has come up so far in this session is, who is planning your city? It's not enough to have planners in the city. We have said cities lack enough planners, but even if we give each and every city a planner or even multiple planners, and we do not interrogate the curiosity and even the professional fashion that shapes their practice, then we are treating the right disease with the wrong medicine. So I think it's very critical that we question our urban practice. And here I would like to draw to a point that we have not mentioned before. We need to question the pedagogy of planning, which means how are we teaching planning in our schools? We are supporting the county governments today, right? But that creates a tendency of dependency, because in the next regimes, we'll still ask for support to come and support the city governments. So the most sustainable way to change systems of planning and to achieve climate resilience is to actually to influence the young and the next generation of planners and urban change makers through teaching and through education. Lastly, in terms of capacity is community, and I think this has been mentioned quite a lot. And Julio, I see you smiling, so you're about to stop me, so I'll try to be quick. Community, we need to understand what community really means. I think there's been a mention of focus on the citizens, on the residents of cities, but this goes beyond the city. And I think you will see this when I talk about the things that may fall through the cracks. We need to interrogate who is really the community when we are including them in the urban practice. And in this regard, we need to understand that development cannot be pursued in a zero-sum manner. It needs to go beyond spaces, beyond disciplines, and beyond actors. So onto the three things that I said should not fall through the cracks. I think it was good that Jorge mentioned that the war against climate crisis will be won or lost in cities. But I wish to add to that argument and say that it's not only in cities. We need to consider the urban-rural linkages and how they influence climate resilience. There's so much focus on cities now, and we are forgetting a very critical dynamic into the climate crisis. And of course, we find that the people in the rural areas are also bearing a heavy weight of the climate emergency. The next thing that we need to be careful not to fall through the cracks is the plurality of language. I think throughout we have talked about climate change, and there's a lot that communities and cities are doing to address climate change, but some of them do not even call it climate change. So does that discount the fact that they are working towards climate adaptation? So I think also Naomi presented in the slides and said 14% of the policies we have explicitly focused on climate change, but possibly there is more policies focusing on climate change, only that they don't call it climate change. Plurality of language is critical. The last one, and to insist what I've said earlier, we need to invest and focus on the next generation of change makers. Initially, my thought was the next generation of city planners, but thank you, Otha, for changing my language. Now it's the next generation of city change makers, because not only planners can change cities, but even the young generation, 10-year-olds, 15-year-olds, and people even outside the urban planning space. I hope to interact with you more on other reflections that may come up from the audience as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. If we are short on financiers and public officials, we are not short on youth and on their views. Thank you for bringing those in such a passionate and meaningful way. So we now have about 10 minutes, not very long, to ask a few questions to our speakers. So please do feel free to bring in your thoughts and questions on the chat. While you do that, I will perhaps throw in an icebreaker by trying to link up to this point on youth. And one of the challenges that we haven't yet addressed in this initial conversations is the issue of technology. Well, we've touched upon, but we haven't fully explored. And so perhaps I would throw in this challenge to our three speakers of how can we, or what are your thoughts in terms of how technology can help us with this accelerating climate resilience effort? Whoever wants to go first, please just go ahead.
I did touch very briefly at key actions about technological change and using available technologies. And I think it is absolutely essential that we harness the power that we have to look at local solutions to local issues, because climate change affects different places differently, and you need to understand your place in order to be able to adapt and mitigate.
Thank you, Susan. Do the other speakers want to share their views? Arthur,
Yeah,
let me, oh,
go ahead,
please.
Arthur.
Who was speaking? Please go ahead. I'm not sure who was speaking.
Yeah, I thought I was trying to come in, Patricia.
Naomi, I can't see your camera, yeah, but I can recognize your voice.
Okay,
Please
good.
go ahead. Oh yeah, I can see you now. Yeah.
Yeah, great. No, I think we shared indeed sort of more planning related, practice related issues on how to make use of technology, for example, in evidence-based planning. But I think we're in terms of mitigation, where we see in transport and buildings efficiency, energy use overall, that there's a lot of innovations going on. So I think as urban planners, finance sector, how to make sure that I think what we've been discussing today, that's ending up in a just way to make sure that it's helping communities most affected, and that the benefits of that are equally sort of distributed or equitably, I should say. But there's a lot to do, I think, in planning, for example, for transport, and planners are engaged on that. And also new areas of transport that are coming in. If you think about sort of innovation, technology, urban air mobility, what will be ahead of us, I think we always have to promote the sustainability principles that I also shared, to make sure they contribute and not only replacing maybe the what can I say, the private cars that we have now into something even worse. How can we make sure it's addressing all needs and not only the ones that can afford it. And in terms of adaptation, I think it's also a lot of data management systems that technology can now help us to inform people everywhere. So many people have access, not only themselves, but through others to phones. And I think a lot of, for example, flood management systems to warn people and communities. I think that's already in place and being used. I think, and lastly, maybe to bring also data together. I think all of us working on the ground data is scarce. How we can come up with sort of platforms within the city, within the nation, within global practices to share that data and make use of it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. Data is going to be part of our discussions in this near future. Now, I would perhaps ask the other speakers if they would like to talk to potential intergenerational challenges in terms of willingness and capacity to use these technologies. We talk about a youth city, we talk about aging cities. Can we reconcile this through technology? Arthur, you're the one perhaps more closely dealing with the youth. Any thoughts bringing this point on sort of the language that we speak? What sort of technological language are the youth speaking, and how relevant others will be, such as, middle-aged planners and older planners in this conversation about technology?
My thoughts would be not to what to say, but how to listen. To listen to what's already being said, how they are navigating this world, which they are experts in when it comes to social interactions, physically dynamic in their community, but technologically. There's a lot to be learned from young people in this capacity, and that's what I would listen. And if you think of it, the analogy of a lifeguard, listen until anything starts to go awry, and maybe sometimes their dynamic of respect might be needed to be reviewed a little bit, but listen is what I would do.
That's an excellent takeaway point. If nothing else, that's brilliant. Thank you. There's another question here on the chat.
Patricia, if you can allow me to weigh in just on that to support what Anna mentioned. I think one way to also understand that this the next generation of change makers is to also deliberately give them a seat at the table and listen to them. I think we have been seeing a lot of youth being given a seat at the table, but are their ideas and their approaches and their way of doing things acceptable in the current system of doing urban systems? There's a lot of youth doing a lot of, for example, campaign on climate adaptation through social media, through TikTok, through dance, through Instagram. But that is not very welcome in the traditional and conventional way of doing planning and advocating for cities. So I think it's to understand the language of the new generation and to be deliberate and committed to the fact that we are giving them a chance to transform cities. And I think one more point to raise is that there is so much effort from the younger generation in terms of climate action and climate adaptation. And I'd like to draw into some activities that I've seen and I've participated in last week from the grassroots organizations who have been trying to regenerate the Nairobi River together with the Nairobi Rivers Commission. And we saw lots of groups. In one settlement, there are almost about 300 youth groups that are helping to clean the river, but they do not have enough support that they would want. For example, they're trying to take solid waste out of the river, but where are they going to dump it or where are they going to take it if there is no citywide solid waste management system? The best they can do possibly is to dump it into another river outside of their settlement. So there is systems that the city needs to put in place, that the national government needs to put in place to support local or locally organized climate adaptation strategies by the younger generation.
Thank you, Beatrice. Very pertinent points as well. So I think what you all seem to be talking about, or a common thread, is this idea of the co-production of knowledge. So rather than just planners sort of, we know how to do this, let's get this done, is really to find a seat at the table for everyone. Well, everyone is probably a bit too ambitious, but for people who wants to have a voice and try and understand each other's language and concerns, which is, as we know, what planners would tend to do, and it comes with its great challenges. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the challenges of reconciling different interests, say, for instance, private, public sector, or financiers and householders. Any thoughts on that anyone would like to share?
I would like to share.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Arjun Singlode. I have been in the planning field for last 10 years, but I have observed that for implementing any planning or environmental related projects, we need access to political power and economic powers. Without this, we cannot implement environmental friendly measures. Like when there is in India, there is a provision like EI will be conducted after the project has been started, but it will impact if environmental impact has to be done. It should be done before the start of the project, because due to some political economic powers, they get anyway sanctioned through the political influence. But if planners has to do more well in their field, they have to gain economic and political power. It can be if we have access to fund, like we have Green International Fund as their development fund are there, but it goes through the political system. For any approval, we have to send all document through the political system. Then they play the game of the power, and where the planner's role is minimized. All credit is gone to the political system. If they like it, they will approve it. If they don't like, they will not approve it. So
thank you,
for
Arjun.
Implementing the planning measures, we have to have a coordinating role between the economic, financial sector as well as political sector, so that we have a more integrated approach to development.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Arjun. I think, yeah, it brings together this idea that we have been touching upon, the idea of governance. How can we actually make it all work between all these different stakeholders? But at the same time, I'm seeing on the chat the point on disruptive planning, which I think it's a very relevant one. And I look forward to continuing these conversations during our urban cafe tomorrow and the day after. It will be a slightly more informal setting where hopefully we'll have a bit more time to explore each and every one of these amazing, interesting discussion topics. So thank you very much for your time. And I think now Julio is going to introduce the next speaker. Thank you.
So let me introduce our respected Eduardo Lopez Moreno, who is co-director of the World Urban Pavilion. And we hope that Eduardo will make a good summary of the key messages, something we have to learn and take into consideration for better future actions. Please, Eduardo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good morning from Mexico. Thank you to Madina, thank you to Julio for reporting on all this exercise. I love the presentation of the countries that are present here. And I like a lot to see that we are truly global. China, India, Iran, Kenya, Vietnam, Canada, etc. Wonderful. Let me start with the Secretary General of the Urban Economy Forum, Krishnan, who remind us that meeting like this is about connection, insights, foundation of networks, learning. He insisted in the need to connect this to the political context that is happening today. BRICS, UN Summit, and other important things. And many speakers mentioned it's not really the political context, but the situation in terms of all the disasters that are happening associated to climate agenda. He also mentioned the need to to connect urban planning to urban economy. In other words, two disciplines that is exactly what is bringing together the 5th Urban Economy Forum and ISOCARP World Planning Congress. He mentioned the importance of inequalities, and in the name of the Urban Economy Forum, he welcomed everyone. Pietro Elisei bring his views from Qatar to Toronto, and the importance of this professional congress, also mentioning the need to work on the intersection between finance and climate responses to the transition, how to make possible the adaptation and mitigation, and how to use renewable energies in this intersection to connect urban planning responses to the climate agenda. Elisabeth Belpaire again mentioned how climate is manifesting in the world cities with some snapshots on this. He talked about slightly about the lowest SDG progress. The infrastructure is not fit for purpose, and she recommended some actions that I would like to mention some. Act across silos, response in terms of ecosystems, and to think about ecosystems and to place an integrated sector responses. He mentioned that the Congress is exactly about that. It's enabling collaboration, thinking in terms of nature-based solutions, and he mentioned that ISOCARP work on theory, policy, and practice, and the different streams that this Congress brings in terms of evidence, special sessions, multi-sectoral dialogues, is a good way of working together. She insisted on the need to work at the neighborhood level solutions and bring these to higher levels of government. She also mentioned the importance of the speakers in terms of pushing boundaries, the use of artificial intelligence, different disciplines working together, the need that was something reiterated by different speakers later of education systems to deliver and to adjust to this. Julio, Carrillo, and Madina rapporteurs introduced the different rapporteurs on this. I like a lot, I must say, and it's very well thought, this Congress in terms of the different 4 tracks: acknowledge community values, decide jointly, invest wisely, and interact. And then we have keynote speakers, and I would like to highlight from each one the most important points. Let me start by my ex-colleague, Naomi Hoogervorst from UN Habitat, who talk about important numbers that we need to recall, trying to bring together planning and finance to local climate actions, and to recall that cities, that was also reiterated later, are at the front line of all this, with a number that repeats twice. It's 70% in terms of emissions, 17% in terms of possible reduction of this. She mentioned that national contributions can connect more and more to reduce of emissions to adapt to climate. And she also said that national urban policies integrate 14% of these responses. NDCs are more and more connected to the urban context, 45%, 39% in some forms. and 60% in mitigation and adaptation. She mentioned something that was repeated in different forms. Climate finance does not reach cities. Only 4% of all funds go to adaptation, and 2.5%, I made my mathematics, to infrastructure needs. Urban planning is inadequate to respond to the resilience of cities because basically, according to Beatrice, the speaker, three reasons: poor implementation, climate action plans, lack of professional capacities, which was reiterated later. More research on climate planning is needed. A point that struck me a lot, and I think we can see the importance of this Congress, is that emissions can be reduced by 90%, according to her, 88% in the building sector. And I think this connection to urban planners, it's very clear in her speech, of Naomi's speech, in terms of compactness, integration, connectivity, better connection from regions to different levels up to the neighborhood again, and the importance of using existing tools, global monitoring framework, assessment tools, the importance of the observatory of proximities, and the continuum that she proposed between assessment, planning, operationalizing, and implementation. She also mentioned investment gaps in climate resilience and the need of low carbon urbanization projects. Finally, she said we need to localize climate finance in terms of 4 elements: community and ecosystem, just transitions that later on Susan mentioned, empowering local communities, and ownership and accountability. Final point that she mentioned is the need of these vertical climate funds. Like others, she said funds are there, but are not reaching locally. Second presenter, Jorge Wolpert, my Mexican colleague, said that the agenda that is urban needs to connect to climate agendas. And for that, we need to understand the effects, but also the climate responses. On one hand, it's clear that refusal to end the use of fuel, the climate resilient solutions that need to be adapted, and renewable energy. I like a lot his presentation on the need to connect financial solutions to local responses, but the importance of trees. And trees in terms of heating and cooling, in terms of health, in terms of human relations, in terms of understanding better how the local plays in this connection to global. Thank you, Jorge. I think your contribution in this important element is fundamental in order really to understand that actions start perhaps in one tree, and this tree that connects to urban planning solutions and other elements. Arthur Orsini, also a wonderful presentation on the youth engagement. Understand that they are real change agents, they are leaders, but we need to change behaviors, we need to change education. The point of driving to school is as important as Jorge with trees. It's something very concrete that brings on the possibilities of action from these young changers, and the motivation and the understanding that they can, with something that appears as simple as mobility from themselves, is very, very important. I like Orsini model in terms of motivation, collaboration, skill building, goal recognition, all this important. Let me move to the debate. Patricia talked about the need to accelerate actions. And something that was not mentioned, but I think it's important to recall, is the Secretary General report on the rescue plan. Only 12% of the Gs have been achieved. 60% on progress on the goal of climate, but on the goal of cities, only 5%. And I think this acceleration and stakeholder engagement through different mechanisms is extremely important. Susan brought something that all of us, we fully share, and we are grateful that she brought back to the agenda, is the notion that we are dealing with extreme inequalities in the cause, in the consequences, in the responses, and the governance, and how this impact on the resilient agenda. And she suggested in order to break this, climate justice spatial planning with participation, with long-term visions, and with actions that are based on evidence and collaboration. Then we have Beatrice that made also a very compelling comments. And I like your idea of connecting what the others said and trying to put it in the framework of a response. Beatrice, climate action requires quick and effective response, but for that moving together. Your perspective on these 4 elements are extremely important. Commitment, capacity, and compassion. 3, sorry, I took 3. And then we have some questions from the floor. And I would like to say that this notion of technology that was also, thank you to Patricia Canelas, somehow not forgotten, but not fully deserved the importance it has. In terms, I like Susan's response in harnessing power for local solutions. I like Naomi's response in the needs of evidence-based planning, particularly in transport and data. And I like a lot Arthur's response in the need to listen, learn, and Beatrice and understand what we are doing. The international challenges and the co-production of knowledge. In conclusion, to say that this pre-Congress is really giving us a good insight of how wonderful the week from the 10 to 13 October will be, and this preparation is really giving us the possibility to understand how different streams have different tracks and how different speakers are going to connect all this in a wonderful exercise. Economy and planning. And thank you to all of you for your intervention.
Thank you, Eduardo. And we're just getting started, right? We're just warming up on what is going to come, the in-person Congress. Now it's time to wrap up. We're a little bit over the time, but we want to really hand the stage to closing remarks by Reza, Chair of Urban Economy Forum, Frank, Secretary General of ISOCARP, and Elisabeth, board member and Congress Director for this joint Congress. So Reza, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. As we bring the pre-Congress opening plenary of this joint initiative by UEF and ISOCARP to close, I would like to extend my appreciation to all of our esteemed participants, colleagues, especially from ISOCARP, yourself, Madina, Pietro, Frank, Elisabeth, Irene, and also my colleagues, Krishnan, Eduardo, Fazile, Ilda, Hani, Alex, for their unwavering efforts in making this event a resounding success. Today, we have explored some different fundamental discussion that is extremely important for our conference, and it was a great starting. Still, I'm trying to emphasize about 5 key points that always is in my target regarding all the conferences like this. First of all, I want to emphasize about creating dialogue and raising awareness. This is one of the main targets for us to share some of the key information with people, with society, and with the professional, and also leaders, politicians. I'm sure some of the key information published by international organization, United Nations, not seen very clearly, very transparently. And that's extremely important. If we understand what is the situation, circumstances of the war, then we incorporate that subject in our action, daily action. And it's really, really important. creating dialogue and raising awareness. Number two is try to do some action. I believe action speaks louder than size. It doesn't matter, small size project, program, or large, or initiative, or programs, or whatever. It doesn't matter. We need to do some action, and we need to try to increase impact and be efficient about our work. Number three is strategic policy engagement. To make a significant impact, we must be strategic in our approach, identifying policies and target some specific program, start communication, interaction, making dialogue with the policymakers is essential. That's why we try to, for this joint forum, try to start a fundamental discussion with the parliament and with the policy makers. That's extremely important. As we try to have small impact on this discussion, their policy, and it will have lots of impact on the situation. Number four is try to bridging gap between theory and implementation. We have different group of people working regarding the sustainable development, planners, academic people, professional in the one hand, the city leaders, politician, and activists in other hand. I think we need to try to bridging gap between theory and implementation and try to facilitate smooth conversation between all the stakeholders and all the audience of the global change. With this kind of smooth conversation, we are able to move forward together and create a synergy for change. As a last one, I want to encourage all of us to establish kind of micro group of advocacy. I think that is extremely important. If we come together, I always use the word of army of sustainability, because we are fighting against non-sustainable world. We need to come together and form a group, advocacy group or working group or teamwork to do some specific action. And I believe if we try to practice like this as a teamwork, our achievement could be more impactful. I hope see all of you in person at the forum during next 20 days, and try to get kind of very solid output of our joint forum together with ISOCARP. I believe we have lots of opportunity to collaborate about global pilots. We have Wolpert Pavilion as a collaboration between Government of Canada and UN Habitat. I encourage to participate in this global initiative and try to make better future for the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your very interesting and very, I think, promising, not only conclusion, but linking and welcoming with the and people in Toronto. So we hope we'll have more people here. So please, now I will give the floor to Frank. Frank, please share your summaries.
Yes, thank you, Madina, and I'm happy to be here, dear colleagues and friends, at the virtual opening of this 5th Urban Economy Forum and the 59th ISOCARP World Planning Congress. It's nice to talk just after Reza. Reza, you know, it's only 1.5 years ago, I think, that we started to dream there, to think about a joint Congress, which would be truly transdisciplinary, you know. Usually we just gather planners, or you mostly gather decision makers or urban economy makers. Now we try to combine these different groups, and I think this is really great to see this happening. So thanks for all the great opening statements. Eduardo already made a fantastic overview, so I will not repeat that. I was just thinking if you would have also do an exercise with word clouds, what kind of words surfaced the most during this first conversation? I think I picked up many words starting with C. So I will just drop some words as a kind of a mental note for the coming conversations. The C clusters I picked up is, of course, around climate crisis, even compounded, climate action, decarbonization, climate cooling, yes, the trees, and also climate justice. I think climate justice is a great thing to further explore what it exactly means. And climate justice in spatial planning, that is certainly a pathway to further explore. We talked about capital, urban climate funding, but of course the huge challenge to really bring it to the cities, another C. And then the third cluster for me is cities and communities. The communities are at heart, you know, this is where place is made. Where people get a sense of place and how they respond to all these crises by increasing their resilience, but also their capacities, and with the children as the future change makers. And then lastly, a couple of PEP words like commitment, compassion, and finally change. I think we're all here to see how to make change happen. Not just the what, but also the how, with who, and not even when, because there is no time to lose. We are behind on time, so we have to catch up with the time to end with the last word. So I leave it here. There is much more to discuss, and we have still plenty of time ahead of us, but not in this session anymore. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Elisabeth, the floor is yours, please.
Yes, and I will ask everyone to switch on your cameras because we will make a group picture. And while you're doing this, I will just announce that we still have 30 sessions for you available today, tomorrow, and the day after. So it is a good filled program. Within 15 minutes, 2 other sessions are starting, one on climate change and climate action in planning, education, and practice. And another one, the future of planning, platforms, technology, and methodologies for evolution of planning practice. So take a break and a coffee and come back in 15 minutes, and let's take a group picture now.
Okay, done? Group picture done.
You only do the
Okay, you have a few.
Yes, all good. We have it. Okay, good.
Okay, so thank you very much for joining, and we hope to see you back in one of the next sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you,
Best of luck.
everyone.
Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks
Thank
for the meeting. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
And thanks for the team behind the screen.